In the deepest corners of the Slavic world, where ancient forests stretch beyond the horizon and mist clings to forgotten paths, there exists a figure so terrifying, so enigmatic, that her very name has echoed through centuries of whispered tales. She is not just a witch. She is not merely a monster. She is something far more complex, far more ancient, and infinitely more fascinating than the children's stories would have you believe. Welcome to Vanishing Legends, where we uncover the hidden truths behind humanity's most enduring myths. If you're drawn to the shadows of forgotten folklore and the mysteries that shaped entire civilizations, then you've found your home. Make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because we're about to embark on a journey that will forever change how you see one of the world's most misunderstood figures. Her name strikes fear into the hearts of those who dare speak it aloud. Baba Yaga, the iron-toothed witch who devours lost children. The wild woman who flies through stormy skies in a mortar, steering with a pestle and sweeping away her tracks with a broom of silver birch. But what if everything you think you know about her is wrong? What if this terrifying crone, this supposed villain of Slavic fairy tales, is actually something far more profound? Tonight, we're going to strip away centuries of misunderstanding and reveal the shocking truth about who Baba Yaga really is. We'll discover why she was cast out from the pantheon of gods, how she became the guardian of secrets that could reshape your understanding of life and death itself, and why her exile may have been the most necessary sacrifice in all of mythology. By the end of this investigation, you'll realize that Baba Yaga isn't the monster of the story. She's the keeper of wisdom so dangerous, so transformative, that an entire civilization had to banish her to the edges of reality just to survive. But first, we must understand the world that created her, a world where the boundary between the living and the dead was as thin as morning mist, and where the forest itself was alive with ancient, watchful intelligence. Long before the church bells rang across Eastern Europe, before the cross cast its shadow over pagan groves, there existed a spiritual landscape so rich and complex that modern minds can barely comprehend its depth. This was the realm of the old gods, the primordial deities who ruled over thunder and storm, harvest and hunt, life and death. At the heart of this ancient pantheon stood figures of immense power, beings whose very existence shaped the natural world and governed the fate of mortals. The great sky father Perun wielded lightning as his weapon, his mighty hammer splitting the heavens with divine fury. His sacred oak trees dotted the landscape like sentinels, marking places where earth and sky touched. But Perun was not unopposed. In the depths of the forest, in the shadows of the underworld, his eternal rival Veles held dominion. Veles, the horned god of the wild places, master of magic and keeper of the cattle, ruled the mysterious realms that lay beyond human understanding. These were not distant, abstract deities worshipped in marble temples. They were immediate, present forces that walked among the people, that could be encountered in the rustle of leaves or the crack of thunder. The ancient Slavs built no grand monuments to their gods. Instead, they carved wooden idols and placed them in sacred groves, at the bends of holy rivers, on the peaks of mountains where the veil between worlds grew gossamer thin. But there were others in this divine hierarchy, figures whose power was so primal, so fundamental to existence itself, that they transcended the simple categories of good and evil. These were the chthonic deities, the earth powers, the goddesses of the deep places and the turning seasons. And among them was one whose authority over the threshold between life and death made her simultaneously the most feared and most necessary of all divine beings. She was known by many names across the Slavic lands: Morana, the Deathbringer, whose arrival marked the end of harvest and the beginning of winter's grip; Marzana, whose effigy was burned each spring in a ritual so old that its origins are lost in the mists of prehistory; She was the crone aspect of the triple goddess, the final face in the eternal cycle of maiden, mother, and wise woman. She was winter personified, death made manifest, the inevitable ending that gave meaning to every beginning. Her power was absolute within her domain. When her season came, the earth grew hard as iron, rivers froze solid, and the green world retreated into dormancy. She was not evil in this role. She was necessary. For without the death of winter, there could be no rebirth of spring. Without the crone's wisdom, the maiden would remain forever naive. Without the ending, there could be no story at all. But something changed in this ancient world. New beliefs arrived from the south, carried by missionaries who spoke of a different kind of divine power, a singular God who brooked no rivals. The old ways were declared heretical, demonic, dangerous. The sacred groves were cut down, the wooden idols burned, the ancient rituals forbidden. The gods of the Slavic peoples were systematically erased from official memory, their temples destroyed, their priests silenced. Yet the people could not simply forget. The old gods had been woven too deeply into their understanding of the world, too intimately connected to the rhythms of their daily lives. So these divine figures went underground, transformed from gods into monsters, from sacred beings into the villains of cautionary tales. They were exiled to the margins of the new Christian world, banished to the dark forests and the borderlands where the old ways still held sway. And none suffered this transformation more dramatically than the ancient goddess of winter and death. Stripped of her divine status, cast out from the pantheon, she became something new and terrible. No longer Morana, the necessary deathbringer, no longer Marzana, the wise crone. She was reborn as Baba Yaga, the witch in exile. Her sacred role as guardian of the threshold between worlds was twisted into something sinister. Her wisdom became cunning, her necessary cruelty became malevolent hunger. Her divine authority became the arbitrary power of a monster. But here's what the Christian chroniclers who recorded these transformations didn't understand. They thought they were destroying the old goddess by turning her into a witch. Instead, they were preserving her in the only way possible. By casting her as the villain of folklore, they ensured that her essential nature, her fundamental role in the cosmic order, would survive even when her temples had been reduced to ash. Baba Yaga became a repository for everything the new faith could not accommodate. She embodied the wild, untamed aspects of femininity that had no place in the ordered Christian world. She represented the kind of power that answered to no earthly authority, that could not be controlled or domesticated or made safe for civilized society. She was the shadow of the new world, the keeper of all the dangerous wisdom that had been officially erased but could never truly die. In her exile, she grew stranger, more complex, more paradoxical than she had ever been as a simple goddess of winter. She became a figure who could be simultaneously helpful and hostile, generous and greedy, wise and wicked. She was no longer bound by the clear rules that had governed her divine existence. In the realm of folklore, she was free to become something unprecedented, something that defied every attempt to categorize or contain her. The stories that grew up around her reflected this complexity. Sometimes she was the devouring monster, the child-eating witch who ground bones to make her bread. But just as often, she was the unlikely helper, the source of magical aid for heroes, brave enough to seek her out. She was the terrible test that heroes had to pass, but also the generous donor who provided them with the tools they needed to succeed. She was the guardian of the threshold, who could either destroy those who approached her domain or transform them into something greater than they had ever imagined possible. This paradox at the heart of Baba Yaga's nature wasn't a flaw in the folklore, it was the point. She represented something that the rational, ordered world of medieval Christianity couldn't accommodate. The idea that wisdom and terror could exist in the same being. that the most profound truths were often the most dangerous to possess, that some forms of knowledge could only be gained by risking everything. But to understand why Baba Yaga became such a powerful and enduring figure, we need to look beyond her divine origins and examine the very structure of the world she inhabits. For the domain of Baba Yaga is not just any forest. It is a place where the normal rules of reality begin to break down, where the impossible becomes commonplace, and where those who enter must be prepared to leave behind everything they thought they knew about how the world works. This is the deep forest of Slavic imagination, a realm that exists at the very edge of the known world, where the familiar paths disappear and travelers must rely on courage, wit, and intuition to find their way. It is here, in this liminal space between civilization and wilderness, between the world of the living and the realm of the dead, that Baba Yaga has made her home. And it is here that we must venture if we hope to understand the true nature of the witch in exile. The forest that serves as Baba Yaga's domain is not merely a collection of trees and undergrowth. It is a living entity, a character in its own right, possessed of an intelligence that predates human civilization by countless millennia. This is the primordial woodland of the Slavic imagination, where every shadow holds secrets, and every rustling leaf whispers of ancient powers that refuse to be forgotten. To enter this forest is to step outside the boundaries of the ordinary world. The paths that once seemed clear and well marked suddenly vanish beneath your feet. The familiar landmarks disappear as if they never existed. The comforting sounds of human habitation fade into an oppressive silence, broken only by the snap of twigs underfoot and the whisper of wind through branches that seem to reach toward you with deliberate intent. This is not the tamed wilderness of modern imagination. This is the forest as it existed in the minds of people who lived at its mercy, who understood that venturing too far from the village meant risking more than wild animals or getting lost. It meant encountering forces that operated by rules utterly alien to human understanding, powers that could transform a person in ways that made returning to normal life impossible. And it is precisely this quality of transformation that makes the forest the perfect setting for encounters with Baba Yaga. For she is not simply a witch who happens to live in the woods. She is the embodiment of the forest's transformative power, the living manifestation of its ability to strip away everything comfortable and familiar and leave travelers face to face with truths they never knew they carried within themselves. But Baba Yaga's forest is not uniform in its strangeness. It has its own geography of the impossible, regions where different aspects of her power hold sway. Near the edges, where it borders the human world, the forest might seem almost normal. A traveler could walk for hours, seeing nothing more unusual than a particularly gnarled oak or a clearing where the light falls in patterns that seem somehow significant. But the deeper one ventures, the more the normal rules of reality begin to fray. Trees grow in impossible configurations, their branches intertwining to form natural archways that frame views of landscapes that shouldn't exist. Paths loop back on themselves in ways that defy geometry, leading travelers in circles without them realizing they haven't moved forward at all. Time itself becomes unreliable, with hours passing in what feels like minutes or seconds, stretching into what seems like eternities. At the very heart of this impossible woodland lies the most extraordinary sight of all. It appears first as a glimmer through the trees, a structure that the mind initially rejects as impossible. But as the traveler draws closer, the truth becomes undeniable. There, in a clearing surrounded by a fence that gleams white in the eternal twilight of the deep forest, stands the most famous dwelling in all of folklore. Baba Yaga's hut defies every principle of architecture and physics. It is a small, crude log cabin, weathered and ancient, that perches precariously atop two enormous, scaly chicken legs. These are not decorative elements or clever stilts designed to look like bird feet. They are actual limbs, complete with talons that grip the earth with casual strength, capable of lifting the entire structure and carrying it across vast distances at speeds that would shame the swiftest horse. The hut is alive in the most literal sense. It can walk, it can run, and most unsettlingly of all, it can spin in frantic, dizzying circles that would make any normal occupant violently ill. But Baba Yaga is far from normal, and she rides out these gyrations with the casual ease of someone who has long since transcended the limitations of ordinary human physiology. The structure has its own will, its own preferences, its own moods. It might choose to wander the forest for days, carrying its mistress on some errand known only to the two of them. Or it might plant itself in a particular spot and refuse to move, spinning endlessly like a child's toy until some unknown condition is met or some invisible signal received. Most importantly, the hut serves as its own guardian. It never presents its door to approaching visitors. Instead, it keeps its entrance turned toward the deep forest, toward the realm of shadows and spirits where Baba Yaga holds absolute dominion. Its back, windowless and forbidding, faces the world of mortals like a wall of absolute rejection. This positioning is not random or arbitrary. It represents the hut's fundamental nature as a threshold guardian, a living embodiment of the boundary between the familiar world and the realm of mystery. To gain entry, visitors cannot simply walk up to the door as they might approach any normal dwelling. They must first prove themselves worthy through knowledge of the proper ritual, the ancient words that demonstrate their understanding of what they are truly asking for. The incantation is simple in its wording, but profound in its implications. "Hut, O hut," the visitor must call out. "Turn your back to the forest and your front to me." These words are not merely a request for the building to rotate. They are a formal petition for passage between worlds, a declaration that the speaker understands the gravity of what they are attempting and accepts responsibility for the consequences. Only when these words are spoken with the proper intent and understanding will the hut respond. The great chicken legs bend and shift. The entire structure groans and creaks as it slowly pivots, and finally the door swings into view. But even then, entry is not guaranteed. The hut's cooperation is merely the first test in what will prove to be a series of trials designed to separate the worthy from the merely curious. The fence that surrounds this impossible dwelling tells its own story of those who have attempted this passage and failed. It is constructed entirely of human bones, bleached white by exposure to the elements and arranged with the methodical precision of a master craftsman. The posts are femurs and tibias, the crossbars are arms and ribs, and the gate itself is fashioned from jawbones whose teeth gleam like ivory in the perpetual twilight. But it is the fence's crowning elements that truly reveal the nature of Baba Yaga's domain. Atop each post sits a human skull, and these are no mere decorations or trophies. Each skull burns with an inner fire, an eerie phosphorescent glow that emanates from empty eye sockets and provides the only light in the clearing. This is not ordinary flame, but something far more unsettling. A cold radiance that illuminates without warmth and reveals without comfort. The skulls are the lanterns of the dead, the final transformation of those who sought Baba Yaga's wisdom, but lacked the strength or courage or cleverness to earn it. They serve as both warning and promise, a visual reminder that the witch's domain operates by rules entirely different from those of the mortal world. Here, failure is not merely disappointing or embarrassing. It is final and absolute. Yet for all its macabre decoration, the fence serves a purpose beyond mere intimidation. It marks the absolute boundary of Baba Yaga's territory, the line beyond which the normal laws of physics and mortality cease to apply. To pass through the gate made of jawbones is to formally enter the underworld, to leave behind the realm of the living, and submit oneself to the authority of powers that exist outside human comprehension. This boundary is not merely symbolic. It has real, tangible effects on those who cross it. Visitors often report feeling a change in the very air as they pass through the gate. A shift in pressure or temperature that has nothing to do with weather and everything to do with stepping from one reality into another. Colors become more vivid or strangely muted. Sounds take on qualities that seem to come from directions that don't exist, and the very ground beneath their feet feels somehow more or less solid than it should. But perhaps most significantly, crossing this threshold changes the visitor themselves. They enter as ordinary mortals, bound by the limitations of their birth and upbringing. What emerges, if anything emerges at all, will be fundamentally transformed by the encounter. For Baba Yaga's domain is not merely a place of testing, but a place of becoming, where the deepest truths about one's nature are revealed through trials that strip away every comfortable illusion and leave only the essential self behind. And waiting inside that impossible hut, in the heart of the deep forest, at the center of a realm where death and life dance together in patterns too complex for mortal minds to fully grasp, sits the witch herself. The Exile, the keeper of secrets, the last remnant of a divine order that was supposed to have been erased from the world, but proved too fundamental to existence itself to truly die. She sits in her impossible dwelling, surrounded by the tools of her transformed divinity, and she waits, not with the patience of a mortal woman passing time, but with the eternal stillness of something that exists outside the normal flow of hours and seasons. She is Baba Yaga, the witch in exile, and every fiber of her being radiates the accumulated power of centuries spent mastering forces that civilized humanity has forgotten ever existed. Her appearance is a deliberate affront to every standard of beauty or comfort that the human world holds dear. She is ancient beyond mortal comprehension, her face a map of wrinkles that speak of eons spent witnessing the rise and fall of kingdoms, the birth and death of languages, the endless cycle of civilizations that believe themselves permanent, only to crumble into dust and legend. Her teeth are not the ivory of human dental work, but iron, filed to sharp points that gleam in the skullfire light, filtering through her windows. They are the teeth of something that has chosen to make itself into a weapon, a creature that has embraced its role as the devourer of the unprepared. Her hair hangs in wild, unkempt strands that seem to move of their own accord, stirred by winds that exist in dimensions adjacent to our own. Sometimes visitors claim to see faces in those tangled locks, the features of those who have fallen to her trials and been absorbed into her very being. Her eyes burn with an intelligence so vast and alien that to meet her gaze directly is to risk losing oneself in contemplation of truths too large for human minds to process safely. She moves through her hut with the casual authority of absolute dominion. This is her realm, shaped by her will, responsive to her slightest whim. The interior of the dwelling defies the modest dimensions suggested by its external appearance, stretching away into shadows that seem to contain entire landscapes. Rooms branch off from rooms in configurations that would be impossible in any structure bound by normal geometry, and the ceiling soars away into darkness that might conceal anything from empty space to entire star systems. The furnishings of this impossible home tell the story of her exile and transformation. There is the great dark stove where she prepares meals from ingredients that no mortal cookbook would recognize. Sometimes these are simple forest herbs and roots, the honest fare of someone who has learned to live off the land. But other times, the aromas that drift from her cooking suggest preparations that involve elements drawn from realms far stranger than any earthly forest, components that exist only in the spaces between dimensions where her true power holds sway. Her table sets itself according to rules that predate human hospitality, producing feasts that might nourish or poison depending on the worthiness of her guests. The chairs arrange themselves in patterns that reflect the cosmic order she once helped maintain when she walked among the acknowledged gods. Even her simple household implements carry traces of her divine nature, imbued with power that makes them capable of tasks no ordinary tools could accomplish. But perhaps most unsettling are the 3 pairs of disembodied hands that serve as her household staff. These ghostly appendages move through the air with purposeful intelligence, performing tasks with the precision of long practice. They sweep floors that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, tend fires that burn with flames drawn from dying stars, and prepare meals using ingredients harvested from gardens that grow in the spaces between heartbeats. These hands are not mere supernatural servants, but fragments of her original divine nature, aspects of her power that have taken on semi-independent existence in the strange environment of her exile. They remember what she once was before her banishment, and their movements carry echoes of the cosmic authority she wielded when the world was young, and the boundaries between mortal and divine were far more permeable than they have since become. Outside her hut, the forest continues its eternal dance of seasons that follow rules known only to itself. Here, winter might give way to spring in the space of a single step, or summer heat might persist for years in a clearing where autumn leaves never finish falling. Time flows according to Baba Yaga's will, rather than the orderly progression that governs the world beyond her domain, creating pockets of temporal distortion where minutes stretch into centuries or decades compress into single moments of transcendent clarity. And through this impossible landscape move her most faithful servants, the 3 horsemen whose daily passage marks the turning of day and night across all the world. The first rides a white horse and wears robes that shine with the pure light of dawn. His face is radiant with the promise of new beginnings, and where his horse's hooves touch the earth, flowers bloom and birds begin their morning songs. He is Baba Yaga's bright day, the aspect of her power that brings illumination and hope to those who have earned her favor. The second horseman burns with the fierce heat of noon. His crimson garments flutter like flames as his red horse carries him across the sky, and the sun reaches its zenith only when he passes overhead. His face is flushed with the intensity of life at its peak, and his presence brings the energy that drives all growth and activity in the natural world. He is her red sun, the embodiment of the vital force that she commands even in her exile from the acknowledged pantheon. The third rider is darkness itself given form. His black horse moves like flowing shadow, and his obsidian robes seem to absorb light rather than reflect it. His face is hidden in depths that suggest the profound mysteries of sleep, death, and the spaces between thoughts where dreams are born. When he passes, night falls instantly and completely, bringing with it all the terrors and revelations that can only exist in darkness. He is her dark midnight, the guardian of secrets too dangerous for daylight exposure. These 3 riders are not merely Baba Yaga's servants, but extensions of her divine nature, aspects of her original role as a cosmic power that have survived her transformation from goddess to witch. Through them, she maintains her influence over the fundamental cycles that govern all existence, proof that her exile has not diminished her essential authority over the deepest structures of reality. If you're fascinated by these revelations about one of folklore's most complex figures, make sure you subscribe to Vanishing Legends right now. We're just getting started on this journey into the hidden truths behind humanity's most enduring myths, and you won't want to miss what we uncover next. But Baba Yaga's power extends far beyond her immediate domain and her supernatural servants. Her influence radiates outward through networks of connection that most mortals never suspect exist, touching lives and shaping destinies in ways that seem like coincidence to those who don't understand the true nature of her exile. She is the hidden force behind countless fairy tale encounters, the unseen hand that guides heroes toward their destinations and provides them with the tools they need to fulfill their purposes. This is where the true complexity of her character becomes apparent. In story after story, she appears as both obstacle and aid, challenge and solution, monster and benefactor. This apparent contradiction has puzzled scholars and storytellers for generations, but it makes perfect sense when understood in the context of her original divine nature. As a goddess of thresholds and transformations, her role was never to make things easy for mortals, but to ensure they became what they were meant to be through trials that revealed their true character. In her exile, this function has become more complex and paradoxical. Stripped of the clear cosmic role she once played, she has become something unprecedented in the pantheon of divine beings. She is a god who operates outside the official religious structure, a power that acknowledges no earthly authority and follows no rules except those written in the deepest foundations of reality itself. This freedom from conventional divine constraints has allowed her to develop aspects of her character that were never possible when she was bound by the formal requirements of her original role. She has become unpredictable in ways that make her simultaneously more dangerous and more fascinating than she ever was as a straightforward goddess of winter and death. Her exile has transformed her into something new, something that transcends the simple categories that once defined her existence. And it is this transcendence that makes her such a compelling figure for those who seek wisdom that cannot be found in conventional sources. She represents the kind of knowledge that exists outside approved channels, the understanding that can only be gained by venturing beyond the boundaries of safe, sanctioned learning into realms where the old rules no longer apply and new forms of truth become possible. This is what makes her encounter with mortals so profoundly transformative. When a hero or heroine finally approaches her impossible dwelling, they are not simply meeting a witch or even a former goddess. They are confronting something entirely unprecedented in the cosmic order, a being who has transcended her original limitations through the very act of exile itself. The trials she sets before these visitors reflect this transformed nature. They are not the straightforward tests of strength or courage that heroes might face when dealing with conventional monsters. Instead, they are complex psychological and spiritual challenges designed to strip away every comfortable assumption about how the world works and reveal the hidden potential that lies dormant within each individual. Consider the nature of her most famous trial, the impossible tasks that feature in countless variations across Slavic folklore. She commands visitors to separate vast quantities of grain from dirt and stones, to clean enormous chambers that seem to refill themselves with grime the moment they are swept, to tend fires that burn with flames drawn from sources that exist beyond normal understanding. These are not simply difficult chores designed to test physical endurance or manual skill. Each task operates on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface, they appear to be household duties, the kind of work that any competent person should be able to accomplish with sufficient effort and patience. But as the hero or heroine begins to attempt them, the true nature of the challenge becomes apparent. The grain seems to multiply, even as it is sorted. The dirt returns to the chambers through methods that defy natural law. The fires respond to emotional states rather than physical fuel, blazing higher when tended by those who understand their true nature, and dying to embers when approached with purely practical intentions. What Baba Yaga is really testing is not the visitor's ability to perform labor, but their capacity to recognize that the world contains forces and principles that cannot be mastered through conventional means. She is teaching them to see beyond the surface appearance of things, to understand that true power comes not from imposing human will upon natural forces, but from learning to work in harmony with patterns that exist at levels deeper than ordinary perception can reach. Those who approach her tasks with nothing but determination and hard work invariably fail. The grain remains unsorted, the chambers stay dirty, the fires gutter out despite all efforts to maintain them. But those who possess the wisdom to recognize that they are dealing with supernatural challenges requiring supernatural solutions find themselves aided by forces they never knew existed. Suddenly, Helpful animals appear to assist with the sorting. Invisible hands take up brooms and begin sweeping. The fires begin to tend themselves, burning with steady flames that require no fuel, but respond to the visitor's growing understanding of their symbolic rather than physical nature. The tasks are completed not through human effort alone, but through a collaboration between mortal will and cosmic forces that reveals new possibilities for how reality itself might be understood and navigated. But here is where Baba Yaga's true genius as a teacher becomes apparent. She never explains these supernatural aids or tells her visitors how to earn them. The wisdom that allows heroes and heroines to complete her impossible tasks must be discovered through intuition, through willingness to abandon conventional approaches and open themselves to guidance from sources that exist outside normal human experience. This is the essence of her role as the keeper of dangerous wisdom. The knowledge she guards cannot be transmitted through ordinary teaching methods because it deals with truths that exist beyond the reach of rational explanation. It can only be awakened within individuals who possess the courage to venture beyond the boundaries of everything they thought they knew about how existence operates. Her most famous pupil in this regard is the beautiful Vasilisa, whose story has become the archetypal example of how encounters with Baba Yaga transform those who survive them. Vasilisa approaches the witch's domain as a frightened child, driven by circumstances beyond her control, to seek fire from the most dangerous being in the forest. She leaves as a young woman possessed of supernatural power and the wisdom to wield it responsibly. The transformation occurs not through any direct instruction from Baba Yaga, but through Vasilisa's own growing understanding of forces that most humans never suspect exist. The small doll that serves as her guide represents the kind of intuitive wisdom that can only be developed through willingness to trust in guidance that cannot be rationally explained or scientifically verified. When Vasilisa feeds the doll and shares her troubles with it, she is engaging in a form of communion with aspects of reality that exist beyond the material world. The doll's ability to complete impossible tasks while she sleeps represents the kind of supernatural aid that becomes available to those who learn to align themselves with cosmic patterns rather than fighting against them through purely human effort. But perhaps most significantly, Vasilisa's success in dealing with Baba Yaga comes from her understanding of boundaries. She knows when to ask questions and when to remain silent. She recognizes that some forms of knowledge are too dangerous for unprepared minds to possess safely. Her wisdom lies not in seeking to know everything, but in understanding the proper limits of mortal curiosity. This respect for boundaries is what ultimately earns her Baba Yaga's approval and assistance. The witch recognizes in Vasilisa a kindred spirit, someone who understands that true power comes not from the ability to force secrets from unwilling guardians, but from the wisdom to approach mystery with appropriate reverence and humility. The fiery skull that Baba Yaga gives to Vasilisa represents this perfectly balanced relationship between knowledge and restraint. It is a tool of immense supernatural power, capable of delivering justice with devastating efficiency, but it is also inherently dangerous, requiring careful handling and respectful treatment. Vasilisa's ability to carry it home safely and use it appropriately demonstrates that she has learned the most important lesson Baba Yaga has to teach: that wisdom and power are inseparable from responsibility. This theme of balanced knowledge runs through every aspect of Baba Yaga's character and domain. Her three horsemen embody this principle in their very existence. They represent fundamental cosmic forces that are neither good nor evil in themselves, but simply necessary aspects of how reality operates. Dawn brings hope and new possibilities, but it also reveals harsh truths that darkness had hidden. Noon provides energy and clarity, but its intensity can burn as easily as it can illuminate. Midnight offers rest and renewal, but it also harbors dangers that daylight keeps at bay. The horsemen serve Baba Yaga faithfully, not because she has enslaved them, but because she understands and respects their true nature. She does not try to use dawn to bring permanent light or midnight to create eternal darkness. Instead, she allows each to fulfill its proper function within the greater cycle that governs all existence. Her power lies in her ability to work with these forces rather than against them, to find her place within cosmic patterns rather than attempting to impose her will upon them. This understanding of her proper role within larger systems is what allowed her to survive and even thrive during her transformation from acknowledged goddess to exiled witch. While other divine beings faded into obscurity when their worship was forbidden, Baba Yaga adapted by finding new ways to fulfill her essential function as guardian of transformative wisdom. She discovered that exile could be its own form of power, that existing outside official structures gave her freedoms that conventional deities could never enjoy. As an acknowledged goddess, she had been bound by the expectations and limitations of formal worship, required to respond to human needs in predictable ways that ultimately constrained her ability to guide genuine spiritual growth. But as an exiled witch operating beyond the boundaries of sanctioned religion, she became free to develop teaching methods that were far more effective precisely because they were more challenging and unpredictable. Heroes who sought her aid never knew whether they would encounter helpful guidance or deadly trials. And this uncertainty forced them to develop the kind of adaptability and inner strength that could never be cultivated through comfortable, predictable experiences. Her exile also allowed her to become more selective about who received her teachings. As a goddess, she had been obligated to respond to all who approached her with proper offerings and rituals. But as a witch, she could choose to help only those who demonstrated genuine readiness for the kind of transformation she offered. This selectivity made her teachings more precious and more powerful, available only to those who had proven themselves worthy through their willingness to venture into dangerous territory, seeking wisdom rather than mere magical aid. The stories that grew up around her during this period of exile reflect this evolution in her character and methods. She became increasingly complex and unpredictable, simultaneously more terrifying and more helpful than she had ever been as a straightforward goddess of seasonal change. Her trials became more sophisticated, testing not just courage and determination, but wisdom, compassion, and the ability to recognize deeper truths hidden within apparently simple situations. This is why encounters with Baba Yaga in folklore so often involve riddles, paradoxes, and situations that cannot be resolved through conventional logic. She is teaching her visitors to think in new ways, to perceive reality from perspectives that most humans never develop. The confusion and uncertainty that characterize these encounters are not obstacles to overcome, but essential elements of the learning process itself. Those who insist on approaching her domain with nothing but rational planning and systematic problem solving inevitably fail her tests. The wisdom she guards cannot be accessed through purely intellectual means because it deals with aspects of existence that transcend rational categories. It requires a different kind of understanding, one that integrates intuition, emotion, and spiritual insight with mental analysis to create new forms of perception that reveal hidden dimensions of reality. This integrated approach to knowledge is what makes her such a valuable teacher for those capable of learning from her methods. She shows her students that true wisdom involves the whole person, not just the rational mind. Her trials engage every aspect of human nature, forcing visitors to discover capabilities they never knew they possessed, and to develop new relationships with forces they had never previously recognized. The transformation that results from successful encounters with Baba Yaga is therefore far more profound than simple skill acquisition or the gaining of magical tools. It involves fundamental changes in how individuals understand themselves and their relationship to the larger patterns that govern existence. They return to the ordinary world, carrying not just supernatural aid, but new ways of seeing and being that allow them to navigate challenges that would have been impossible to handle before their encounter with the witch in exile. Yet for all her power and wisdom, Baba Yaga remains a figure of profound loneliness. Her exile from the company of other divine beings has left her isolated in ways that most mortals cannot fully comprehend. She exists in a realm between worlds, too powerful and alien for human society, but no longer welcome in the pantheon of acknowledged gods. Her interactions with visitors provide her only connection to the broader community of conscious beings, making these encounters as important to her as they are to those who seek her aid. This underlying loneliness adds another layer of complexity to her character and helps explain why she sometimes seems to take genuine pleasure in the company of visitors who prove themselves worthy of her respect. When heroes and heroines demonstrate the wisdom and courage she values, they become more than test subjects or recipients of her teaching. They become, for a brief time, companions who can appreciate the depth of her knowledge and the sophistication of her understanding. These moments of connection are precious to her precisely because they are so rare. Most who approach her domain are motivated by desperation or greed, rather than genuine seeking for wisdom. They want magical solutions to their problems, rather than the kind of fundamental transformation that her teachings actually offer. Their failure to understand her true nature and the value of what she provides only deepens her isolation and reinforces her conviction that exile was perhaps the inevitable result of possessing knowledge too advanced for most minds to safely contain. But when she does encounter individuals who can appreciate the full scope of her wisdom and power, the meetings become something approaching friendship between equals. These visitors leave her domain, carrying not just supernatural tools, but genuine understanding of the cosmic principles she embodies. They become, in a sense, her agents in the wider world, carrying fragments of her exile knowledge back into human society, where it can continue to influence events in subtle but significant ways. Through these chosen few, Baba Yaga's influence extends far beyond the boundaries of her forest domain. Her teachings spread through networks of connection that most people never suspect exist, shaping the development of individuals who go on to become leaders, innovators, and guardians of wisdom in their own right. The witch in exile thus maintains her role as a cosmic force, despite her banishment from official recognition, proving that true power cannot be destroyed by political or religious decree, but only transformed into new and sometimes more effective forms. Here at Vanishing Legends, we're committed to uncovering these hidden connections between ancient wisdom and modern understanding. If you're finding value in this exploration of Baba Yaga's true nature, make sure to like this video and share it with others who might be ready for this kind of profound revelation about the figures that have shaped human consciousness for millennia. The influence of Baba Yaga's exile extends even into the structure of the stories that preserve her memory. The fairy tales that feature her as a character are themselves shaped by the paradoxical nature of her existence as a banished goddess operating outside conventional categories of good and evil. These narratives reflect her complexity by refusing to fit neatly into the simple moral frameworks that characterize most folklore. In traditional fairy tales, characters tend to be clearly identifiable as heroes or villains, helpers or obstacles, forces of good or agents of evil. But stories involving Baba Yaga consistently blur these distinctions, creating narratives where the same character can simultaneously represent salvation and destruction, wisdom and danger, justice and cruelty. This narrative complexity mirrors the psychological and spiritual complexity of the transformation process she oversees, creating stories that operate on multiple levels of meaning simultaneously. The very structure of these tales serves as a teaching mechanism that parallels Baba Yaga's own methods of instruction. Just as she presents visitors with trials that cannot be solved through conventional approaches, the stories about her resist interpretation through standard analytical techniques. They demand the same kind of integrated understanding that she requires from her students, forcing listeners to engage with multiple levels of meaning simultaneously and to develop new ways of processing information that transcends simple categorization. This pedagogical function of the folklore itself suggests that Baba Yaga's influence extends even into the methods by which her story is preserved and transmitted. The tales become vehicles for the same kind of transformative teaching that she practices directly, allowing her wisdom to reach individuals who may never venture into her forest domain, but who encounter her through the medium of narrative tradition. The storytellers who preserved these tales were themselves, in a sense, students of her exile wisdom. They understood intuitively that simple morality tales would be inadequate to convey the profound truths embedded in encounters with the witch. Instead, they developed narrative techniques that mirror her own teaching methods, creating stories that challenge assumptions, defy easy interpretation, and reward careful, nuanced analysis with insights that cannot be obtained through superficial reading. This is why scholarly attempts to reduce Baba Yaga to a single, consistent character type have consistently failed. She resists academic categorization not because the folklore tradition is confused or contradictory, but because her essential nature transcends the analytical frameworks that scholars bring to bear on her stories. She exists in the spaces between categories, in the paradoxes that reveal the limitations of rational analysis when applied to phenomena that operate according to principles beyond conventional understanding. Her resistance to scholarly categorization is itself a form of teaching, demonstrating to modern minds the same lesson she has always offered to visitors in her domain, that reality contains dimensions that cannot be grasped through purely intellectual approaches. The confusion that academics experience when trying to analyze her character mirrors the disorientation that heroes feel when confronting her trials, serving as a contemporary version of the transformative challenges she has always presented to those who seek to understand her true nature. This ongoing pedagogical function helps explain why Baba Yaga has remained such a compelling figure throughout centuries of social and technological change. Each generation discovers new aspects of her character that speak to their particular circumstances and challenges, finding in her exile wisdom resources for dealing with forms of complexity that their predecessors never had to navigate. In the modern era, her role as a figure who operates outside established institutions has taken on new relevance as traditional sources of authority have lost much of their credibility and influence. Contemporary seekers often find themselves in situations analogous to the heroes of folklore, forced to venture beyond the boundaries of conventional wisdom in search of understanding that can help them navigate unprecedented challenges. The environmental crises, technological disruptions, and social transformations that characterize contemporary life have created conditions where the kind of adaptive wisdom that Baba Yaga represents becomes particularly valuable. Her teachings about working with natural forces rather than attempting to dominate them, her emphasis on developing intuitive as well as rational capacities, and her insistence on taking personal responsibility for the consequences of one's actions all speak directly to challenges that modern civilization must address if it is to survive and thrive. Her exile status also resonates with contemporary experiences of alienation and displacement that characterize modern life. Many individuals today feel disconnected from traditional sources of meaning and guidance, forced to create their own paths through landscapes that seem to shift and change faster than any map can chart. In Baba Yaga, they find a figure who has not only survived such displacement, but has transformed it into a source of power and wisdom. The witch's ability to thrive in exile offers a model for how individuals can maintain their integrity and purpose, even when separated from the communities and institutions that once provided structure and support for their lives. Her domain in the deep forest becomes a metaphor for the psychological and spiritual spaces that modern people must learn to navigate when conventional sources of guidance prove inadequate to their needs. But perhaps most significantly, her complex relationship with power offers insights that are particularly relevant to contemporary struggles with authority and governance. Baba Yaga wields enormous power, yet she is accountable to no earthly institution. Her authority derives not from position or appointment, but from her mastery of fundamental principles that govern existence itself. She demonstrates that true power is not something that can be seized or granted by external forces, but must be earned through deep understanding and consistent alignment with cosmic patterns that transcend human political arrangements. This aspect of her character provides a powerful alternative to both authoritarian models of power that depend on domination and control, and anarchistic models that reject all forms of authority as inherently corrupting. Baba Yaga represents a third way, showing how authority can be exercised responsibly when it is based on genuine wisdom and used in service of larger patterns rather than personal gain. Her trials consistently test whether visitors understand this distinction between authentic and illegitimate forms of power. Those who approach her seeking magical tools to dominate others or to avoid the natural consequences of their actions invariably fail her tests. But those who demonstrate understanding that power must be earned through service to principles greater than themselves receive aid that enables them to fulfill their proper roles within the larger cosmic order. This teaching about the nature of legitimate authority has profound implications for how contemporary societies might reorganize themselves to address the challenges of the modern era. Baba Yaga's example suggests that sustainable forms of governance must be based on demonstrated wisdom and commitment to serving the well-being of the whole, rather than the narrow interests of particular groups or individuals. Her emphasis on testing and trial also offers insights into how such wisdom might be identified and validated. Rather than relying on credentials, appointments, or popular approval, her methods focus on revealing character through challenging circumstances that strip away pretense and reveal underlying motivations and capabilities. The trials she sets are designed not to exclude or punish, but to ensure that those who receive power are genuinely prepared to use it responsibly. The psychological sophistication of these trials reflects her deep understanding of human nature and the ways that individuals can deceive themselves about their own readiness for responsibility. Her tests consistently reveal the gap between what people think they want and what they actually need, between their conscious intentions and their unconscious motivations, between their stated values and their actual priorities when those values are put under pressure. This aspect of her character makes her particularly valuable as a guide for contemporary individuals who are trying to understand themselves and their place in increasingly complex social and economic systems. Her methods offer tools for self-examination that go far beyond conventional therapy or counseling, providing ways to discover hidden aspects of personality and potential that remain invisible under ordinary circumstances. The transformative power of encounters with Baba Yaga lies precisely in this revelation of hidden dimensions of the self. Visitors to her domain discover capabilities they never knew they possessed, but they also confront limitations and blind spots that they had managed to avoid acknowledging in more comfortable environments. The combination of revelation and challenge creates conditions where genuine growth becomes possible in ways that protected, supportive settings cannot achieve. This is why her domain must remain dangerous and unpredictable. The safety and comfort that most people seek would actually prevent the kind of deep transformation that her teachings are designed to facilitate. The uncertainty and risk that characterize encounters with her are not unfortunate side effects of dealing with a powerful supernatural being, but essential elements of a pedagogical system that has been refined over millennia of practice. Her exile has allowed her to develop these teaching methods to a level of sophistication that would have been impossible within the constraints of conventional religious or educational institutions. Free from the need to provide comfort or reassurance to large numbers of followers, she can focus entirely on the needs of individual students and design trials that are perfectly calibrated to their specific requirements for growth and development. This individualized approach to teaching reflects her deep respect for the uniqueness of each consciousness that approaches her domain. While her trials share certain common elements, they are never identical because no two individuals require exactly the same experiences to achieve their full potential. Her wisdom lies not in applying universal formulas, but in perceiving what each visitor needs to discover about themselves and creating conditions where those discoveries become inevitable. The precision with which she crafts these individual trials demonstrates the depth of her understanding of consciousness itself and the mechanisms through which awareness can be expanded and refined. Her methods reveal insights into human psychology that anticipate many of the discoveries of modern depth psychology, suggesting that her exile wisdom includes understanding of mental and emotional processes that contemporary science is only beginning to explore. This psychological sophistication is one of the reasons why stories about her continue to resonate with modern audiences who might otherwise dismiss folklore as primitive superstition. The accuracy of her insights into human nature transcends cultural and historical boundaries, speaking to universal aspects of consciousness that remain constant despite changes in technology and social organization. Her role as a teacher of psychological and spiritual development positions her as a bridge between ancient wisdom traditions and contemporary approaches to human potential. The integration of rational and intuitive knowledge that her methods promote offers resources for addressing the fragmentation and alienation that characterize much of modern experience, providing ways to restore wholeness and meaning to lives that have become divided against themselves. The Witch in Exile thus emerges not as a relic of a superstitious past, but as a guide whose teachings become more relevant with each passing generation. Her wisdom offers tools for navigating complexity that no purely modern approach has yet been able to match, suggesting that her banishment from official recognition may have been not a loss, but a necessary preservation of knowledge that civilization was not yet ready to integrate responsibly. As we continue our exploration of Baba Yaga's true nature and significance, we begin to see how her exile has transformed her from a simple, seasonal goddess into something far more complex and valuable. A teacher whose methods have been perfected through centuries of practice with individual students. A keeper of wisdom that remains as relevant today as it was when the first storytellers began crafting tales about the witch who lives at the edge of the world. If you're beginning to see how these ancient patterns connect to contemporary challenges and opportunities, make sure you're subscribed to Vanishing Legends. We're uncovering connections between mythological wisdom and modern life that could transform how you understand both the past and the possibilities that lie ahead. But to fully appreciate the sophisticated nature of Baba Yaga's teaching methods, we must examine more closely the specific techniques she employs and the psychological principles that underlie them. Her trials are not random tests of endurance or arbitrary displays of supernatural power, but carefully designed experiences that target specific aspects of consciousness and character development with surgical precision. Consider the seemingly simple task of sorting grain from dirt and chaff that appears in so many of her trials. On the surface, this appears to be nothing more than tedious manual labor, the kind of mindless work that might be assigned to test patience or humble pride. But those who approach it with this understanding invariably find themselves overwhelmed by the sheer impossibility of the task. The grain multiplies as they work, the dirt seems to regenerate itself, and hours of careful sorting yield no visible progress. The futility of purely physical effort forces visitors to abandon their assumptions about how problems should be solved and opens them to guidance from sources they would normally dismiss as imagination or wishful thinking. Suddenly, birds appear to help with the sorting, or mice emerge from hidden corners to separate the grain with tiny, precise movements. The task that seemed impossible through human effort alone becomes manageable through collaboration with forces that exist outside normal perception. But Baba Yaga's genius lies in never explaining how this supernatural aid is earned, or why it appears for some visitors and not others. The discovery must be made through direct experience, through the kind of intuitive understanding that can only develop when rational analysis proves inadequate. She is teaching her students to recognize and work with dimensions of reality that most humans never learn to perceive. Dimensions where intention and alignment with natural patterns matter more than physical strength or clever planning. The psychological mechanism underlying this teaching is profound in its sophistication. By creating situations where conventional approaches fail completely, she forces visitors to discover resources within themselves that they never knew existed. The desperation that comes from facing truly impossible tasks strips away the protective layers of personality and social conditioning that normally prevent access to deeper levels of consciousness. In this state of extremity, individuals become capable of perceiving guidance and assistance that would be invisible under ordinary circumstances. They learn to distinguish between the voice of ego-driven planning and the quieter, more subtle communications that arise from sources beyond personal consciousness. This discrimination between different types of inner guidance becomes one of the most valuable skills they can develop, serving them long after they leave her domain. The animals that assist in her trials represent this principle in perfect symbolic form. They embody aspects of natural intelligence that operate according to principles humans have largely forgotten, showing visitors how to work in harmony with patterns that exist at levels deeper than conscious thought. The mouse that can sort grain with perfect efficiency does so not through superior manual dexterity, but through instinctive understanding of the essential nature of what it is sorting. When visitors learn to collaborate with these animal helpers, they are really learning to access forms of intelligence that exist within their own consciousness, but have been suppressed by over-reliance on rational analysis. The external animals are mirrors for internal capacities that have been dormant since childhood, when the boundary between imagination and perception was more fluid and permeable. This integration of rational and intuitive intelligence creates a form of consciousness that is far more capable and resilient than either mode operating in isolation. Visitors who successfully complete Baba Yaga's trials emerge with enhanced problem-solving abilities that allow them to navigate complex situations with a combination of logical analysis and intuitive insight that gives them significant advantages in whatever challenges they subsequently face. But perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of her teaching methodology is the way she uses fear and uncertainty as catalysts for growth rather than obstacles to overcome. The terror that visitors experience when first encountering her domain is not an unfortunate side effect of dealing with supernatural forces, but a carefully calibrated element of the transformation process itself. Fear has the capacity to strip away pretense and reveal authentic character in ways that comfortable circumstances cannot achieve. When faced with genuine danger, individuals discover what they truly value, what they are actually willing to sacrifice for, and what core principles they will maintain even under extreme pressure. This revelation of authentic self becomes the foundation for all subsequent development. The witch's terrifying appearance and unpredictable behavior serve to maintain this state of productive uncertainty throughout the encounter. Visitors can never become comfortable enough to rely on familiar patterns of response, forcing them to remain alert and adaptable in ways that promote rapid learning and character development. The constant possibility of failure or destruction keeps them engaged at the deepest levels of their being. Yet beneath this surface, terror lies a profound compassion that visitors gradually come to recognize as they demonstrate their worthiness through courage and wisdom. Baba Yaga's frightening exterior is itself a test, designed to separate those who are motivated by genuine seeking from those who are merely curious or seeking easy solutions to their problems. Those who can see past the terrifying mask to the teaching intelligence beneath earn access to guidance that is both powerful and precisely calibrated to their individual needs. This use of terrifying appearances to conceal benevolent intentions reflects her deep understanding of how consciousness develops under pressure. Comfortable, supportive environments tend to reinforce existing patterns of thought and behavior, while challenging situations force individuals to discover new capacities and develop more flexible approaches to problem solving. The paradox at the heart of her character, the simultaneous presentation of threat and aid, monster and teacher, creates exactly the kind of cognitive dissonance that promotes psychological growth. Visitors must learn to hold contradictory perceptions simultaneously, developing the mental flexibility that allows them to navigate complex situations where simple categorization proves inadequate. And so, we arrive at the end of our journey into the heart of the deep forest, where we have encountered not a monster, but a master teacher, not a villain, but a guardian of wisdom so profound that it could only survive through exile. Baba Yaga emerges from the shadows of misunderstanding as something far more extraordinary than the fairy tales ever dared suggest, a divine being who transformed her banishment into the ultimate freedom, her isolation into the perfect laboratory for developing the most sophisticated methods of human transformation ever devised. Her story is our story, the tale of everyone who has ever been forced to venture beyond the comfortable boundaries of conventional wisdom in search of truths that cannot be found in approved sources. She represents the courage to embrace uncertainty, the wisdom to recognize that the most valuable knowledge often comes disguised as danger, and the understanding that true power can only be earned through service to principles greater than ourselves. In an age where traditional authorities have lost their credibility and individuals must forge their own paths through unprecedented complexity, Baba Yaga offers more than historical curiosity. She provides a blueprint for transformation, a methodology for discovering hidden capacities within ourselves, and proof that exile from conventional systems can become the gateway to authentic power and wisdom. The witch who was cast out from the pantheon of gods has become something far more valuable than any officially recognized deity. A teacher whose methods remain as relevant today as they were when the first storytellers began crafting tales about the impossible hut that stands at the edge of reality. Her exile preserved not just her memory, but her essential function as the guardian of transformative wisdom, ensuring that future generations would have access to knowledge that might otherwise have been lost forever. As we conclude this investigation into the true nature of Baba Yaga, we understand that she was never the monster of the story. She is the story itself, the eternal tale of how consciousness evolves through challenge, how wisdom emerges from uncertainty, and how the greatest teachers are often those who operate outside the boundaries of respectable society. Her domain in the deep forest remains open to all who possess the courage to approach her threshold, the wisdom to speak the ancient words, and the understanding that true transformation requires the willingness to leave everything familiar behind. The witch in exile waits still, as she has always waited, for those brave enough to discover that the path to authentic power leads not through conquest or accumulation, but through the willingness to be forever changed by encounters with mystery. Her story continues in every individual who chooses growth over comfort, wisdom over safety, and transformation over the preservation of illusions. She is Baba Yaga, the keeper of dangerous wisdom, and her exile has made her immortal. If this exploration into the hidden depths of mythology has opened new pathways of understanding in your own journey, Vanishing Legends will continue to be your guide into the forgotten wisdom that shapes our world. The legends may be vanishing, but their truths remain eternal, waiting to be rediscovered by those with eyes to see and courage to venture beyond the familiar paths into the transformative darkness where real wisdom dwells.